I'm Joy Cherrick, and I am exploring the ideas of Charlotte Mason. Charlotte Mason was an educator in the 1900s, and she really was able to illuminate for us some principles that we can all apply in our homes, whether or not we follow the Charlotte Mason method as it is laid out in the modern era. So today we are just going to be looking at and exploring some of those ideas and who she was and why it might be worthy to listen to her, because she's got some important things to say. When my oldest was born, I was poring over books about nursing and how to get the baby to sleep and how much sleep do they need and when do I know, when should I wake them up, should I not wake them up? I was so just in that whole world. Oh, and cloth diapers and which ones, and the whole thing. And I was sitting on our couch one day and my husband came in, and he had been going through his own journey that I didn't know about at the time. Learning about education. He was trying to figure out where I was concerned with food and sleep needs. He was concerned about the educational needs of our child and what school would be the best one to send him to, and are there teachers. And we had this Acton Academy there in Arizona, so he was looking into that, and there were just some really great schools around us. So he was trying to figure out what school would be best, what educational path, are my kids going to go on? So like I said, I was sitting on the couch one day and he walks in the door and he says, I want to talk to you about something. He said, I've been doing all this research on education, and it seems like homeschooling is like a thing I would like us to consider. And I was like, homeschooling? I am not qualified to homeschool our children. That is what I said. And he was like, well, you don't have to make any decisions right now, but if you'll just look into it, just read about it a little bit, kind of do your own research, because you're going to be the one who would have to do it. So I was like, okay, well, I'll look into it. So I did. I started looking into it, and I did not realize how many different opinions there were about how to educate a child. All these different educational philosophies started coming at me, and I was getting so overwhelmed because one person would be so rigid, and that just didn't feel right. And then another person would be so free and open, and I was like, well, that doesn't seem right either. And my mom sent me For the Children's Sake by Susan Schaefer McCauley. And also she sent me her other book, For the Family's Sake. And I read these books, and I was like, this is what I want. This is what I want for our children. What For the Children's Sake does is it basically lays out Charlotte Mason's 20 principles, and Susan Schaefer McCauley uses her 20 principles as her outline, and then she kind of walks you through her various ideas and then how they can apply to a modern family. So was Charlotte Mason? Who is she? Why are we listening to her? Why am I talking about her right now? Well, she was an educator in the late 1800s. She died in 1923. And so she kind of grew up and was at her kind of peak of her time during the Victorian era. She actually lived to witness the war between the states, the First World War, and even at her home there in Ambleside, they experienced and went through the flu epidemic of 1918. What Charlotte Mason lays out in her 6 volumes is not just a how-to manual. She actually avoided that. What it is principles, and then she gives examples throughout her volumes on what those principles look like with legs on. So over the next few months, I'm actually going to be exploring these 20 principles and working them out myself so that I can articulate them more concisely to you, but also so that in my own heart, I have them more deeply set in place so that I'm able to apply them in my daily life. And what I'm finding is the more that I'm learning about the 20 principles, the more that I'm understanding about education itself, it really shows me just opportunities for improvement. And I love a challenge, and I love knowing that I'm not done yet and that there are many things for me to continue working on. And we know that, when we're in relationship with one another, we sharpen each other. And that's what's happening with me right now. I'm in a book club and we're reading through For the Children's Sake. And that kind of sent me on this kind of journey to study a little bit more deeply about Mason so that at the book club I could be helpful in some way, illuminating some of her ideas and making sure that we are getting the most out of them. So Charlotte Mason started early as an educator. She was 16 when both of her parents passed away within a year of one another. And she started living with different relatives and saw some poor children walking down the street, and something struck her when she saw those children, that she knew that she wanted to be an educator and that she wanted to help children like those children that she saw that day. And so she did. She made it her life's mission to try to cultivate educational principles, but she didn't start off that way, right? Early on, she wrote geography books. She traveled all around England studying and getting information for these geography readers that she was writing. And when she was, I believe she was in her 40s, she took a job as a lecturer for about 4 years teaching educational theory at a teaching college. And then she got sick and she wasn't able to work for a while. And I always hear these stories about people who they get sick and then they have all this time to think and ponder. And then, on the other end, and that's what happened with her, on the other end, she gave her first lecture on home education. And this lecture was so moving. It was so changing for that culture. It was different. And people started passing out copies of the lecture and sending them to their friends. And, she would get invited to speak somewhere else. And what was interesting, when I read her biography, The Story of Charlotte Mason by Essex, I can't say her last name, it's C-H. I was so struck by Mason's humility, that she was constantly learning, always a student, always trying to find a way to challenge her own underlying understanding and kind of going, okay, well, but what is this? And let's really try to figure out what the principle is here that we're operating under. Now, she was in a time where scientific discovery was like compounding left and right? Like the telegraph gets invented, and she writes this whole thing about how amazing that is and how we're harnessing nature to get it to do something for us. And of course, with our cell phones, like we're doing that all the time. We're harnessing nature and utilizing like God's creation to have it do what we need it to do. And so that's kind of the thought process she was coming at. A kind of a scientific thought process, but with a reverence and a respect for children. So I'm going to read a quote to you that she declared at the end of her life. Now, she had ended up after 30 years, she was working in the city of Bradford. She moved up when she was in her 50s, up to Ambleside in the Lake District, and that's where she created her house of education, her school of education up there. She was so entrepreneurial in this way. We would look at someone like that and just go, wow, they have some business savvy. They really have it together. So she was able to purchase a home there because of the money that she was getting from her lectures. And she, in the book, it kind of says she was always like breaking even. And for our family was entrepreneurial. We owned our own business. And I have to say, it's really easy to put all your money back in your own business. So people say, oh, she wasn't wealthy, but guys, she had a cook. She had a driver drive her around. She had household staff that she was employing. Like, I think that's pretty remarkable, that she orchestrated this whole house of education and was able to get a really vibrant educational college for young women, to send out governesses and public school teachers all across the nation. She really had a sense of pride for her country and wanted to serve and help build up and strengthen her country, and through her work. And I think she really succeeded in what she was trying to accomplish. So here's the quote that I wanted to share with you that she had at the end of her life. It was a labor of love that she implemented throughout her life. She didn't become physically wealthy by the world standards, but at the end of her life, she declared, "I am an old woman, a very old woman. But also, I believe a multimillionaire, and as we are beginning to understand, millionaires are people of many perplexities. It is not an easy thing to know how to make use of vast wealth. My vast wealth would amuse a rich man, for it consists of a mere invigorating, exhilarating powers that have already been of some use in the world and should help to solve most of the problems which perplex the world today. Therefore, I shall do my best to put them down in black and white." And that is what she did in her 6 volumes, is she wrote down these ideas, this rich wealth that she had accumulated through her studies, through her work with children, through her relationships with children, through her working with parents and teachers. I mean, she was so connected. She was not in isolation. That is one thing that I think is so important to understand about her, was she would write up these ideas and then mail them to her contemporaries and ask to be challenged, to ask them to read through these papers. And it was through this back and forth where she's really trying to discern what is true. Is this an educational principle that we can hold up? Well, let me know if you have any questions, and thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.